and welcome to Donor Dialogue. Each month, we will bring you a conversation with a community leader about the current state of philanthropy, the donor experience, and insights into the donor and volunteer mindset. I'm Lindsay Blok, Senior Vice President of CCS Fundraising, an executive team member serving in Southern California and across the Southwest. CCS has been a strategic partner with nonprofit organizations for more than 70 years, raising funds, planning and implementing fundraising strategies, and impacting the world through philanthropy. After working with nonprofit organizations for 15 years, I'm particularly fascinated by the donor perspective, how our volunteers view nonprofit organizations and philanthropy, and how we can all work together to improve our communities.
Welcome back to Donor Dialogue. Today is part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Duane Vajgrt. I hope you enjoy the conclusion of our conversation. How do you think about bringing on new board members?
Well, I sit on the governance committee, and in fact, I'm chair of that. And so one of the main charges of that committee is board recruitment. And clearly that's always a challenge because, and again, in this attempt to be as strategic as possible, that we, as the governance committee, and then again, sharing it with the greater board, but have gone through a process of identifying our needs, the where we see potential either corporations or businesses or that sort of thing, be the possible source for those people. So we have sort of a grid that we've put out of, or have created of our particular needs, whether it be somebody from the legal background or finance or that sort of thing. So we try to be as strategic as we can. That's not always, you can identify the exact perfect, board member. It's not always easy to necessarily find him. But once we have identified somebody and reached out to them as part of being a board member, then usually I or Phil have a preliminary conversation with that person, again, just to sort of, in general terms, give the responsibilities for what it is to be on our board, and evaluate their level of interest. And then if they're wanting to go forward with that, then as many of the members of the governance committee, have a meeting or interview with that person. And assuming their continued interest, when they join the board, we then have a pretty robust onboarding process. And what that involves is that we usually have about an hour and a half to 2 hour, and in this era, a Zoom meeting to orient them. We created a very robust board book that they're, in pre-COVID times, were sent home with. Now it's all electronic, and actually for us, facilitating that process and making all documents accessible and referable is that we've actually recently, and again, with the encouragement of Phil, our executive team, and Marlene, that we've recently actually engaged with an electronic board process called Board Effect. And it allows us to electronically put all of our documents and reference materials and all that sort of thing, including the PowerPoint that's part of our onboarding orientation in that electronic board book, as it were. So, and then in addition to that, to try to make a new board member feel welcome and to have a resource that we assign them a board buddy. And we found that to be especially effective. It's just somebody that, well, again, pre-COVID times, they would try to sit next to them at an in-person board meeting. But now they're available, for a call or reference and that sort of thing. So, and we really stress too that we know that there's sort of a steep learning curve in terms of there's a lot of acronyms and things like that in our work. And again, not uncommon, but to tell somebody no question is stupid. It's like, be sure to ask, don't be intimidated, and really try to draw out new board members too in terms of board discussion. So either as the governance chair or just at a board meeting, I really try to find an opportunity to solicit the thoughts and feelings of some of our newest board members too. So
that's great, because it can be pretty intimidating to start to join this board where everyone seems like they know every acronym, every term, and all this history, and you're coming in brand new, just trying to pick things up as you go.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, no, definitely. So it really has been effective. And then as another part of that, and we did this pre-COVID, it's been a little bit more of a challenge with COVID, but we at least twice a year try to have just a board social where it's nothing related to, the issues that we're dealing with as a board. It's just purely a social thing to involve the board members and their spouses or significant others, just to spend some time with each other and hang out with each other. And so again, before COVID, that included things like a bowling night one night, an escape room thing on another event, a Duffy boat rides with picnic, around the back day or whatever. So they're all things, and that really, I think, is very effective in terms of developing a more cohesive sense of the board and engenders more goodwill and strengthens friendships and that sort of thing. So with COVID, we're really sort of missing that. I mean, we have had 2 events where basically we found, one of our board members found a great brand new evolving business that creates basically what's the craft drinks and ships them to you, and they're on ice. And so we've had a cocktail when we've gotten together. But that's one thing that's definitely been expressed by our board members, is that even the 10-15 minutes of chatter before a board meeting that took place when it was in person, people are sort of missing that. And so we're very much looking forward to when we get back to being able to meet in person. But by the same token, in terms of one thing I think that we've learned and appreciated, that with COVID and having to have our board meetings via Zoom, that our attendance is almost 100% at our meetings, just because it's obviously made it easier. People can do it from home, or on the rare occasion, if they're running late, catch it on the phone as they're driving home or something like that. Being safe, of course, just listening, not looking
right.
at. But so I think once we go back to sort of being able to meet in person, it's going to be interesting to see how we decide to take advantage of that. And it might be that maybe every other board meeting we do as a Zoom sort of thing, just to make it easier. But I think initially people are going to be very eager to get back and see each other in person. But
yeah. Well, it's been interesting to hear some of the pros and cons. When we first entered into this pandemic, what were some of your first thoughts as a board member? And have those shifted over time? Have those changed in the last year?
Well, as an agency, it obviously necessitated just a total major shift in how we as an agency provided services, because obviously essentially 100% of what we did, our staff, was meeting in person with our clients. And so when things abruptly shut down, we just had to pivot immediately. And to that end, I just can't speak highly enough of, again, Phil, his executive team in terms of the supervisors and such, and the staff, how quickly they pivoted and really figured out ways to provide our services as effectively as they could. And of course, a lot of that hinged on being able to utilize, in essence, telemedicine or Zoom, to be able to have as much sort of a one-on-one feel as possible. And then obviously a pretty significant number of our clients are really sort of living at or below the poverty line. And so obviously not necessarily having access to internet or whatever. And so for those people, hopefully they at least have a phone. And so the social workers or nurse case managers or whatever would still have communication with them in that regard. And then that sort of evolved over time. Again, they really, within days, brought most of our crucial services, back up. And then also, as a major part of what we provide in terms of our support services is our food pantry. And again, obviously sort of a nationwide sort of issue is that so many volunteers were, elderly or older, and, were in that demographic of being at greatest risk and such. And so our at least in the short term, and even still to some degree still, the number of people that we had available to us to staff that changed. And so again, the person who supervises the food pantry for us had to step up in a big way and really sort of reorganize things. For us, that also meant a lot more actual delivery of things from our food pantry. So had to incorporate new or different volunteers to actually deliver food, as opposed to the clients, coming to us and picking them up. But but the one upside, and I think just on a broader thing as far as across the healthcare industry in general, is that I think the one sort of upside of COVID is that it's increased people's appreciation and willingness to participate in telemedicine. And it actually has the upside of really increasing their access. Obviously not always as ideal as meeting one-on-one with a clinician. Obviously physical exam and that sort of thing is a bit more limited. But I think ultimately this is going to have the added benefit of us being able to more easily reach out, especially, again, a fair number of our clients have some transportation issues. So again, the ability to meet with us via telemedicine, as opposed to having to maybe take 1 or 2 buses to get to, our venue. So again, like you sort of referenced, there's ups and downsides of this pandemic for sure.
Right, right. And when we talked before, you mentioned some of the challenges with the gala, the AIDS walk, but that, Radiant is finding some creative ways to either get people together virtually or in person. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, our first challenge was our AIDS walk. We were very fortunate that our last in-person gala was at the end of February, 2020, I guess, yeah, just before things really shut down. So we were lucky to have gotten that in for, our, which actually for us is the end of our fiscal year. But so we were lucky there. So the first event that we had to deal with in person, or relative to COVID, was our AIDS walk, which obviously is an in-person thing and outside. And so we went ahead, thankfully, again, in this sort of setting of COVID, I think so many people appreciated the increased need and the increased demand. And we were especially lucky this year that our corporate partners really appreciated that fact as well. So in all honesty, I think we actually had a little bit better corporate participation this past year than we did the year before. Again, very much in debt to our extraordinary Director of Development, Susan Comiant, who just worked so hard to make that as efficient and as effective as possible. Again, upside, downside, that we actually, our costs were less clearly than putting it on in person, which we also very much was the same for our gala, which then this year we had to shift and pivot to having an online event as well. So it cut our costs. So in the long run, more or less, we netted just about the same as we did the year before. So that was definitely a positive. And overall, as an agency, we've done pretty well in the COVID era. Again, we're really blessed with a lot of donors who really understood and appreciated that the demand was much higher than in the past. And along those lines, I mean, we saw like a 300% increase in the need for our mental health services. Our pantry needs doubled, our housing requests almost tripled. And mental health was probably almost the single biggest thing. Again, not too surprising. But as a consequence, we actually decided to have just a sort of a standalone event or a solicitation, basically, just identifying to our donors this huge need in our mental health services. And what we're experiencing is like a 2 to 3 week wait time, to access our services, which under the circumstances we just didn't find acceptable. And so we actually had a month-long solicitation to our donors, specifically targeting our mental health needs. And with that, we were then able to hire another full-time, psychologist to help with our client mental health needs. So on balance, I think we've been really fairly blessed that we've sort of weathered COVID pretty well so far. I think to some degree, people are probably fatiguing a little bit in terms of, donors, because there has been so much need. And I know from a personal level that I've tried to support as much of the basic needs in both, not only our organization, but other food pantries, both where I live in Palm Springs and then here in Laguna. So definitely COVID has represented a challenge to lots of not-for-profits, I know.
Right. Did 2020 affect your giving in ways you might not have expected? Did you increase giving, decrease giving? What happened for you personally, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, fortunately, and in terms of our donor base at Radiant, we have a fairly significant number of donors, probably like myself, who are largely in their retirement years. And so for at least, thankfully for us personally, that we were able to still give. I mean, we definitely far exceeded this past year our philanthropy budget. But just, again, felt that the need was so great. So, made more than one donation to a lot of food pantries or to our local community in terms of a program that they initiated to help, waiters and waitresses and people in the service industry try to survive in Laguna, obviously, given that tourism was down so much. And so a pretty significant cohort of, I think, our donors were sort of in that same ballpark with us in terms of recognizing the need, still being, very generous. And so if anything, it actually increased our, giving this particular year. Don't know that we can sustain that forever, but
yeah, that was going to be my next question. Do you think you'll continue that this next year, pull back some, readjust your priorities? Just what are some of your thoughts, and how are you and Jeff thinking about it?
Well, again, we very much get hooked into the need, and I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so if I'm involved in a fundraiser and I hear somebody making a very compelling case, it's just hard for me to not, participate. And I'm sort of a sucker for matching funds because I just love to see my dollars go further. And so we've been blessed, actually specifically during that mental health appeal, that we had an anonymous donor. I mean, we knew who she was, but she didn't want to be acknowledged. And she did $20,000 matching towards our $50,000 goal. And so that just gave us a huge shot in the arm in terms of our success with that particular appeal. So thankfully, there are those people out there that thankfully have the resources that they can help in that way. And I think they really understand and appreciate that need is out there. And so feel really blessed when we have people like that willing to come to our aid. So,
yeah. Now, if we were to look back on March and April of 2020, with the benefit of hindsight, is there anything you might do differently as a board member or as a part of Radiant Health Centers?
Not a lot. I mean, again, I have my hats off to Phil, that almost, because our board meetings are once a month, and there was such urgency with the need to pivot and such that basically Phil and his executive team figured out what needed to be done and just basically launched forward and did it. And we were sort of hearing about it almost after the fact. I mean, he did definitely keep us apprised, but there was just so much work that needed to be done so quickly that they figured out what needed to be done and just made it happen. So and the other thing too, and again, sort of back on the theme of communication, that I think one of the things that they did very effectively was to communicate both what was happening, especially to our clients, because clearly they're the ones that were most caught in the lurch, and to comfort them, knowing that, you know, we're there, we're gonna be there to meet your needs. And then two, trying to keep that communication going with donors as well. And so in fact, last night I just participated in the salon where we had some of our truly wonderful major donors that are working with us are on our campaign to be able to increase our programs towards this development of an FQHC and expand our services to the greater LGBT community. And so it, you know, it was not a solicitation of any sort. It was just keeping them in the loop, knowing what's going on, and sharing with them the very exciting news about some renovations that we're doing to increase our physical capacity in terms of exam rooms and treatment rooms and that sort of thing, as well as creating like a community conference room and that sort of thing. So looking forward to the future, keeping them engaged and up to speed with you know, what we're up to.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing would be keep your eyes on the future. You really need to think ahead. And again, we're just in the midst of this year working on our strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. Typically, you know, it would be 3 to 4, just based on the fact that we just recently renewed our lease for 5 years. We're going to probably make it a 5-year plan. But you really need to always be thinking ahead and give it your best shot as to how you think things are going to look, recognizing that something like COVID could come up and that things, you know, change in an instant. But again, that was one thing that was really hammered into us by our board coach, is this strategic thinking. And so having a strategic plan, really thinking through what you think the future looks like, how that's going to impact you know, donors, all that's very important. So I just really think keep looking forward. Don't look back. So
That's great. Well, Duane, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for this conversation. It's been wonderful to talk, as always. And thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Okay, well, it was very much my pleasure. I was so impressed with some of the other, you know, interviews you've had with some other people. When I first reviewed some of them myself, I was a bit intimidated. I'm not sure that I've got some of the wisdom that some of those people seem to have, but I hope something that maybe I said today was a little helpful, because really just all the not-for-profits, it's a challenge for sure, on and on. And so if anything I said helps, I hope that was the case. But just we really feel blessed with our donor base and the staff and the leadership that we have at Radiant. So we plan to continue to grow and serve our community.